The first act of the group in the village was to blow open the gate to the home of an ethnic Albanian family, fire very many shots from a number of police at the house and through the open front door, shooting fatally an unarmed man in casual civilian clothing as he tried to close the door. He died a little later in the house in the presence of members of his family. The evidence does not establish that the dead man had any NLA affiliation. He obviously presented no threat to the police when he was shot, and he was taking no active part in hostilities. The police did not seek to enter the house to search or to interview other persons inside. Instead, a car and construction material in the front yard were then deliberately set on fire with the aid of incendiary material the police had with them. The police then moved on. The next action of the police was to deliberately set fire to a nearby house of another ethnic Albanian, again with the aid of incendiary material the police had with them. There was no entry of the house to search. The evidence does not establish that the house had been used for hostilities against the police or the army that day, or that the owner was affiliated with the NLA. The police continued moving along the main road of the village, setting fire to some further 10 houses in similar circumstances. Near the centre of the village, the police found a group of 13 male ethnic Albanians sheltering in the basements of 2 houses of the family compound of Adem Amatovski. Women were also in one of the basements. The men were unarmed, dressed in civilian clothes, and offered no resistance to the arriving police. Valuables, money, and identification papers were taken from the men, and valuables and money from the women. Outside in the front yard of one of these houses, the men were forced to lie down on the ground and pull up their clothing to cover their eyes and heads. The men were then very severely and repeatedly beaten and kicked by the police. Some were hit with rifle butts as they lay on the ground. They were threatened with knives, and one man had a cross carved on his back by a policeman with a knife. One of the men was shot in the arm or hand as he lay on the ground. One of the men in this group was then shot dead while others were lying on the ground. He was shot many times. Most of the remaining men were then forced to walk under armed escort to a police checkpoint at a house at the entrance to the village, Brać's house. However, 2 elderly men were forced to stay behind at Adem Amatovski's house. One of them was then shot many times by police and died by the house. The remaining 10 men were further violently mistreated by the escorting police by Brać's house at the entrance to the village, so much that some of them were rendered unconscious. The men were then detained at Mrkovci police station, where they were subjected to further severe beatings. One of them died on the following day as a result of the beatings. He had been taken to hospital. He had been gravely mistreated by members of the police unit in Ljuboten and later by different police at Skopje police station. The evidence does not establish, however, that the police led by Johan Tarčulovski, who mistreated this man in Ljuboten village, beat him with the intent to murder him. The police who gravely mistreated this man at Skopje police station were not among the police led by Johan Tarčulovski. The evidence does not show that any of the men who had been sheltering in Adem Amatovski's family compound had any NLA affiliation. While they were shot and mistreated, they were in police custody. They were unarmed, very heavily outnumbered, and obviously presented no threat to the armed police. They were not taking any active part in hostilities. The police in the village continued and reached a group of houses belonging to an ethnic Albanian family on the outskirts at the far end of the village. While the evidence concerning activities at these houses is in many respects unsatisfactory, it is open on the evidence that there could have been firing at the police and at the army from one or more of these houses. As the police approached these houses, 5 men ran from the back of one of these houses uphill across a field from the house towards trees. As they were running, they came under heavy firing from the police and also fire from army positions located on a slope above the village. 2 of the men managed to escape. The dead bodies of the other 3 men were found in the field. All 3 had been hit by very many bullets. It is the evidence of the police that 3 firearms and ammunition were found by the police near the bodies of these 3 dead men. However, this evidence about these weapons is suspect, because the same 3 weapons were later claimed by police to have been the weapons of some of the 13 men mentioned earlier who were sheltering in the cellars of Adem Amatovski's compound. They were used in evidence in court proceedings against those men. The bodies of these 3 dead men in the field and the bodies of the 2 men who had been shot many times by police earlier outside the house of Adem Amatovski were left where they had fallen. No police investigation of the scenes or of the bodies was undertaken. They were buried by villagers 2 days later. Eventually, some 8 months later, the bodies of these men were exhumed in the presence of representatives of this tribunal, and autopsies were conducted. However, the bodies had undergone significant changes in that time. In respect of the 3 men shot in the field, it was established that many bullets had entered the bodies from more than one direction. but it was not possible to determine which bullet or bullets had actually caused the deaths. It is not possible to determine, therefore, whether these 3 men died from police or army fire. The charges are limited to firing by the police. It has not been established, therefore, that the police caused the deaths of these 3 men. Further, while the evidence is not fully convincing, it is possible that these 3 men that were shot in the field had been firing at the police or army and were running with their weapons to other shelter. On this view, it has not been established that they were not engaged in armed hostilities. For these 2 reasons, it has not been proved that the 3 men shot in the field were murdered by the police. As people were trying to flee from the village in the afternoon of 12 August, at a police station on the road to Skopje, which was manned by different police and not those who had entered Ljuboten, men were separated from women and subjected to cruel treatment. From there, they were taken to police stations in Skopje, where many of them were further severely mistreated. In turn, several of the Ljuboten residents detained at police stations in Skopje were taken to Skopje City Hospital. Others were brought to Skopje Court 2. There is evidence that at each of these 2 locations, the men may have been further mistreated. It has not been established, however, that the persons who carried out the assaults at the court and the hospital were under the authority of the Minister of Interior.